Anyone hyped up as much as I am after watching this episode of Fairy Tail? 7 fucking dragons. Of course it's not 10,000 dragons, but still 7 dragons managed to come through the portal, and they're wrecking havoc at the end of this episode. And what makes it even better is you have this, like, future rogue. He's controlling these dragons. So right there, really shocking and interesting. I wonder exactly how he's controlling these dragons, but that's not the main point I want to talk about. The main thing here is that this episode, man, it really had that tension building up, especially with these dragons. For instance, you just see them walking out of the portal one by one, just seeing them walk. All of a sudden, they're looking at humans like they're fucking bugs. They roar, and they move into the center of town. So, it just shows you that they don't even care about humans at all. And then we have some creepy, different-looking dragons popping out of the portal. Like, we have one that looks like a freaking rock. We have the Jade Dragon back. We have a solid freaking flaming dragon called Atlas. I mean, we have a bunch of different dragons coming out of the portal, and sadly enough, we only have 7. I wish all 10,000 technically would have came out, because that would have been so fucking badass if that happened, because I can already imagine the terror and epicness of seeing 10,000 dragons fighting everyone at the same time. So, this episode overall, though, it had some interesting things. Now, majority of this episode technically was just building up that tension for upcoming episodes, because this episode had that tension for the dragons, the threat of the dragons, showing the threat, because you could see all the wizard guilds pretty much could not even put a dent into the dragons when they did anything they could, when they cast their magic at the dragons. For instance, they didn't leave any scratch whatsoever. Now, here's the thing, okay? I want to bring up something that's really interesting, and it actually made me realize this after watching this episode. What the hell is with Hero in number 7? I've known it for a while now, but I mean, it's always 7. If you don't know what I'm getting at it's the entire factor that we have 7 dragons that came out of the Eclipse portal. And then we have, you know, July 7th is the day the portal opens. July 7th for the 7th day of the month is when, you know, the dragons disappeared in the past. And then, you know, Fairy Tail time skips for 7 years. I mean, what the hell is with 7? I mean, seriously, I know this is going to be built up into something crazy later on. And I mean, oh yeah, Lucy's mother died on, like, July 7th, if I'm correct, like, the same day as the dragon. So, I mean, it shows you right here, July 7th is a major date, or the 7th. Number 7 is a big thing in Fairy Tail's universe, and I wonder why Hero is so keen on using that entire term all the time. So I'm willing to bet that this is slowly going to be built up in future upcoming arcs, I mean way down the road, but that is something I wanted to bring up if no one really has ever realized that, because 7 is a really reoccurring factor. So besides that, okay, this episode had really good and constant animation quality. There wasn't that much animation derps in this episode. Of course, there was some scenes, but nothing too bad that really distracted the overall main point of this episode. The scenes that didn't look that good were probably just, you know, the scenes where you see them just talking and standing still. Those were the scenes that kind of didn't look that good, but that is fine. All the good and important scenes, especially the dragons walking, getting to see them come out of the portal, and at the same time getting to see them fly around, the animation right there was on point, so I can compliment that. Now, the music, there's one thing I do want to talk about this episode. Now, I'm a big fan when it comes to music of anime, especially Fairy Tail. Fairy Tail's soundtrack is one thing I love so much about the series, especially the original Fairy Tail. I feel like the music in this new version of Fairy Tail, it's good, I like the music, but it's not holding up to that, I guess, soul and that essence that the original Fairy Tail music had. For instance, I mean, does anyone not want to hear, like, Armored Titania again when you freaking watch this episode? I mean, when you see those dragons coming out of the fucking portal, you want to hear some really revved up badass music, or at the very least, a very calming solo, like, creepy music, but they really didn't do that. I felt like the music, honestly, wasn't on par to the original Fairy Tail, and they could have really used some of those music soundtracks in this episode. Of course, they probably can't, but I mean, I feel like it's time they tried to go back to some of their original themes in the original Fairy Tail, because the songs, I feel like, need to be overhauled a little bit. There's, like, only one song I really care about that's really badass, but it has been repeated almost every single episode since Fairy Tail 2014 has came out. Hopefully, we'll get some new songs eventually. Besides that, I feel like this episode was solid. There was not much really going down if you think about it. The overall progression we had in this episode was the door closed, and the eclipse door closes because of Lucy and Yukino. They close it with their celestial spirits, and at the same time, you see 7 dragons escape, Natsu sitting on top of a pillar, and you have it that looks like Rogue, or future Rogue, is about to fight Natsu. So, that's really all the development we technically had in this episode, which is fine. A good positive progression. Just, I guess this episode was kind of lacking compared to the other episodes. The main thing that makes this episode so good is because the dragons were there this entire episode, kicking some fucking ass, or just their presence here is really crazy. But there's one thing I do want to bring up. For instance, will Arachnologia pop up now? I mean, since we have dragons, we haven't seen Arachnologia for a very long time. I wonder if he will pop up since these 7 dragons are here. I mean, the King of Dragons has to come. I mean, you think about this for a logical second. I mean, you have to feel like, I guess Arachnologia should come to this moment since 7 dragons are technically invading his territory, so we don't know. He could possibly pop up. But anyways, tell me your thoughts on this episode, everybody. Did you enjoy this week's episode of Fairy Tail? I love all of you so much. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.